Healthcare is out of control. Our roads are crumbling. We have a lot of problems here at home. So
that's the false choice.
He sounds a lot like Donald Trump on campaign.
This is the false choice.
Smug MAGA commentator Scott Jennings is back again, repeating the same worn-out talking points and political spin. He normally appears on Abby Phillips' show, but lately he's been showing up on other programs too, this time on Kasie Hunt's CNN segment. Snorts in this clip will see Kasie Hunt push back on some of the claims Scott Jennings makes, while other panelists also step in to question him. It becomes a fairly tense exchange. And of course, I'll share a few of my own thoughts as we go. So, let's dive in and watch it together.
So, Scott, global oil prices settled above $100 today for the first time since August 2022. How long is President Trump going to be able to tolerate this?
Well, you don't want to exit this situation without meeting all of your military objectives. No ballistic missile and drone program.
You just said that we won.
No nukes. Would
that not suggest that all these things are done?
No exporting of terrorism, and no aggressive Navy. And right now, what we're seeing is that they're willing to commit acts of terrorism on the high seas. And so that's what we have to take control of, and that's what we have to do to finish the job here. Ultimately, you want to go to the American people at some point and say, we had military objectives, we had targets, we've met them all, we took out all the targets, we're confident they cannot continue to do the things we don't want them to do. Part of that is they're not going to be able to commit this kind of terrorism and keep the strait shut down. So when they're able to take control of that and eliminate this threat, that's when you would see an end game here. But you can't exit this prematurely and leave them in a situation where they can do what they were doing before we entered the situation that caused us to go there in the first place.
I think the thing I'm stumbling on here is if, as you say, they need to go to the American people and, tell them, hey, this is why this is important. How can the president go out and say, we've won, and simultaneously say, we need to keep going?
Well, I think he's communicating that militarily we have absolutely crushed most of what they are able to do. They're still obviously able to commit acts of terrorism here on the high seas, which is causing trouble in the Strait of Hormuz. But as a general matter, we've sunk their Navy, we've taken out over 90% of their ballistic missile and drone program. We have absolutely crippled these people. But that's the thing. We have to finish the job. You don't want this to be unfinished because they're fanatics and they're going to keep trying day after day after day. So that's why you have to get all the way there and make sure they can't reconstitute it in short order.
Kristen Soltis-Anderson, how do you see the landscape here? Let me play for you this. This was Caroline Sunshine talking about MAGA support for this or lack thereof. And we'll talk about it on the other side. Take a look.
Social media is a more accurate representation of public sentiment. You can track it in real time versus polling. So this idea that 90% of the coalition supports that just quite literally isn't possible when you look at the wide swath of people, independents, moderates, Muslims in Dearborn, Michigan, young men who all joined President Trump's coalition specifically because they were really excited about the promise of no new wars.
So she claims social media more accurate than...
Yeah, that was bait. You're trying to bait me. I see what's going on here.
I would like to know what you are actually seeing in your numbers about how Americans are feeling about this and what you think the real sense is.
There is no doubt that there is a swath of the American public that is a typically younger piece of the puzzle that is very skeptical of the American projection of power abroad. Younger Republicans tend to look more askance at it. They don't remember the Cold War. They don't think as highly of what America can do abroad. But we're talking about a difference between 80% and 90% support among Republicans. It's very small differences here because by and large, Donald Trump still has an awful lot of sway with his base. I think if it was anybody but Donald Trump pursuing this, there would be a lot more sort of backlash among those young Republicans saying, I don't know about this. But right now, how you feel about Donald Trump basically dictates how you respond to a poll about this war.
Congressman, what are you hearing from people in South Carolina? I want to play for you what Senator Lindsey Graham had to say about gas prices and the impact there. This isn't, of course, what he said about boots on the ground, which is another thing we can also talk about. But let's look at what he said about gas prices.
If you think gas prices are high now, give the Ayatollah a nuclear weapon to terrorize the region, to threaten the Straits of Hormuz. He will control gas prices forever, that regime would, if they had a nuclear capability.
So there's that argument, but then there's the question of why now, and also whether South Carolina's sons and daughters should go to war, which he said he was going home and telling people that they needed to do. What do you find?
I wouldn't send any of my kids when they're going into the Middle East for something like this. I think to say there's reluctance about this is an understatement. There's not much appetite for this at all, for a few reasons. Number one, Scott talked about success. How is that defined? because first it was described as regime change, and then it was suppressing terrorism. On the back end, you also have, fresh in everyone's mind, Iraq and Afghanistan and my generation who just do not want to go into a war without clear-cut objectives to which Americans don't feel directly threatened. And on top of that, the billions of dollars we're spending every single week, which ultimately could add up to trillions of dollars to our national debt. There's just a lot of reasons to kind of view this as a bad idea. And I think it's, I just don't think the appetite's there. And I don't think.
I don't understand your vibe. We're at war with people who have been at war with the Western civilization for 47 years. And you appear to me to be, sort of cheering against American success. I hate to break it to you, but for 47 years, they have killed American troops, maimed American personnel, waged war on the civilized world. They have missiles, they have drones, and they told our own negotiators they have material for 11 nuclear bombs. Does this not seem imminent to you?
This is a false choice, Scott, you push. You can be against Iran, all the terrorism they support. You can be against Maduro and toppling them. But when it comes
you just don't want to do anything about it.
Let me finish. But when it comes down to strapping your kids and sending them off to war and spilling their blood and adding billions and trillions of dollars to our national debt, whenever we have our problems here at home, healthcare is out of control, our roads are crumbling, we have a lot of problems here at home. So
that's the false choice.
He sounds a lot like Donald Trump in campaign.
I have to laugh when Scott Jennings says that this is a false choice because Joe Cunningham is absolutely right about the point he's making. We hear the same story again and again about all the problems here at home. But what are we always told whenever someone suggests fixing them? Suddenly the money disappears. We're told we can't afford Medicare for all. We can't afford tuition-free college. We can't build high-speed rail. And that America is too big or that it would simply cost too much. But somehow when it comes to war, there's always unlimited money ready to go. And people like Scott Jennings are quick to jump in and claim that, oh, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. But the reality is that Scott Jennings and the rest of the MAGA crowd are usually the same people saying we can't spend money on these things in the first place. If there were no war happening and someone like Joe Cunningham or any reasonable person suggested taking the billions that normally go to war and using that money to help people here at home, Scott Jennings would immediately label it socialism and say it can't be done. That's the pattern we see over and over again from these MAGA voices, where there is always a blank check ready for war, but barely anything offered when it comes to actually improving the lives of ordinary Americans. There's a little more to this discussion. So let's hear what else they had to say.
Simply engages in something without a clear objective, and the administration has not been clear on what their objectives are. It changes simply by the day.
I totally disagree.
Maybe you want to engage in endless war, Scott. I don't. I don't really want to engage in another Iraq or Afghanistan, even though President Trump set out they wouldn't do this. And now he changed his tune. So this has broad bipartisan support. I think Republicans are appalled that he's doing this.
That's false. That is 100% false.
Okay, well,
we have a pollster sitting right over there. She'll tell you
that all Republicans are in support of this.
It is true that Republicans are generally behind Trump right now, but Republicans also aren't the only voters, and that's why I say it's not necessarily a political slam dunk at all for the president. Right now, it's very much a reflection of, do you trust Donald Trump? Then even if you're skeptical of American intervention, you're kind of willing to see this play out. But if you're not a fan of Donald Trump, then you're saying this is just another reason why I don't like him. It's very much how you already view him is how you're viewing this conflict.
All of the reasons that have been put forward for this military operation are entirely valid ones, whether it's regime change, whether it's oil, whether it's liberating the people, whether it's stability in the Middle East, whether it's preventing terrorism worldwide. They're all entirely valid. The problem is that the administration has shifted its definition, or at least its explanation, multiple times out of the president's mouth and other people. And I think that level of uncertainty is what's making people pretty uncomfortable.
I think this might be the third time I've said this on the air in the last week. What if you're explaining your losing?
And wait, Kasie, you say you want explanations, but then when you get explanations, you say that's losing. It's been clear.
Scott,
that is not fair. They have an aggressive navy. They have a nuclear ambition.
They have all
these
things.
What drones.
I'm saying
they have missiles, and they export terrorism, and they say debt to America.
It's President of the United States has had a number of different types of explanations. He has mentioned many of the things you just laid out at different points.
Yeah, and I think they all can be true. But I think when the public is uncertain, I think that's when there's unease. If more American kids start dying, if gas prices go up, if there's instability in the region, this uncertainty that people have is going to be problematic for the president. But like to your point, Scott, they're all valid reasons. It's all, these are okay reasons to launch military efforts across the country. If they're just not explained well, that's when people start losing patience. That's all I'm saying.
I don't want to be spending money over in that area or packing up men and women in boxes and send them back home to their families over something like this. And as my generation who went over to Iraq and Afghanistan, it's still fresh in their mind. Maybe you want to go to war with countries. There are a lot of bad actors around the entire world, but we have our own problems at home.
All right. It seems like the Democratic seat has turned into the America First seat at this table, at least for this conversation. All right, coming up next here.
In this panel discussion, Joe Cunningham is really the only one making clear sense by saying we should not be involved in this war at all. Meanwhile, you have Elliot Williams trying to frame it as if there are valid reasons, and that the issue is simply how those reasons are being explained. But in my view, Joe Cunningham has it exactly right. We should not be sending young Americans overseas to fight in a war of choice that Donald Trump and a group of aggressive war supporters decided to start. Scott Jennings can try to spin the conversation however he wants. And of course, he repeats that 47 years line, which has clearly become their favorite talking point over the past week. It honestly makes you wonder how many times that phrase has been repeated across television networks since this conflict began, because between CNN panels and other cable shows, it has likely been said thousands of times by mega commentators like Scott Jennings. But the bigger point is that Joe Cunningham is correct about where the public actually stands, because the American people do not want this war. Some Republicans claim that 80 or 90% of their party supports it. But anyone still fully locked into that mindset is probably not going to be persuaded anyway, since many of them simply follow whatever Donald Trump says and share the same hawkish attitude toward military action as figures like Trump and Lindsey Graham. The more important group to watch is independents and Democrats, and polling shows strong opposition to this war among those voters, with overall support sitting at only around 40%. Being on that side of public opinion is a losing position politically because Americans have seen this pattern many times before. The same type of commentators who pushed for wars decades ago were beating the drums back then, and now voices like Scott Jennings are doing the same thing again today. No matter how carefully they try to explain it or how much they try to reframe the argument on Kasie Hunt's show, the reality is that most Americans simply do not want another war. My hope is that Democrats recognize this and push back clearly so they can connect with voters heading into the midterms. But my concern is that they might repeat the familiar pattern we saw on Kasie Hunt's panel, where they say things like, yes, the enemy is bad, and yes, there's serious concerns, but the problem is only that the strategy was handled the wrong way. That kind of message misses the point entirely. The message should be direct and clear that we are against this war, that we are not going to spend billions or even trillions more dollars on another conflict of choice, and that we are not willing to send more sons and daughters overseas to fight in it. That is the argument Democrats should be making, and they should pay attention to voices like Joe Cunningham, who are expressing that position clearly rather than giving space to partisan commentators like Scott Jennings. But I'm curious what you think about this debate.